Hello, everyone. Happy to be back with you. Right now, we have a young Indian with us, Prachi Agarwal. Let's listen to her. Over to you, Prachi.
Thank you so much, Dr. Mathur, for having me, and hello to everyone as well. As Dr. Mathur introduced, I am Prachi Agarwal, and I was born and raised in Calcutta, in India. And here I attended the Modern High School for Girls, where I think my biggest takeaway was that our teachers always at Modern High always taught us that if you have a lot of degrees to your name, but you're not a decent human being, then all you really are a highly literate person with no education. So, and this was something that teachers across different classes emphasized on, and therefore that was really the start of what does it really mean to be educated. And this was a question that I keep coming back to, because I'm still a student. And so after Modern I went to Flame University in Pune for my undergraduate education. I majored in economics and my minor was public policy. And there I found a bit of the answer to what it means to have an education, because a lot of my classes were very reading heavy, they were discussion heavy, and then we were coming back home and writing papers on, or if that were essentially either reflection pieces or things that again needed us to go out and read more work, read what other people had done on that particular topic, and then assemble our ideas and organize it, basically, so to say, in an essay of sorts, especially in the public policy classes that I had. And that really showed me that I think maybe education is actually about learning to think and developing their critical thinking ability to look at what is happening and formulate our own opinions and then use that to probably do something productive with it. And but at Flame I also had the opportunity to just collaborate with a couple of my friends. There was this spirit of experimentation, and we were very fascinated with the idea of what is this thing called Shopify. So we just created something on we created a site on Shopify called Broke Packers, where we were selling notebooks and phone cases that we had designed and some of our peers had designed. And we would do all these pop-up stores in different colleges, in all these intercollegiate fests, even in our own college. And what I learned from that experience then was that maybe education is not just about all this about critical thinking, sure, but it's also about equipping ourselves and knowing that we don't really need anyone's permission to do something. It's all about you have an idea, you want to know how it works, then just go out and do it. And you'll fail, you'll probably succeed, but whatever it is, you would have learned a thing or two, as we did with Brook Packers. Around that time, I was also interning at something at the WageIndicator Foundation's lab at Flame. And WageIndicator works towards reducing the information asymmetries in the labor markets in about, I think at that time, in about 190 plus countries around the world. India is of course one of them. And as an intern at WageIndicator, my job was to look at the changes in labor law in a select set of countries. But one thing that I kept coming across in all the different things that I was doing in my internship was this term decent work. And a lot of countries were coming up with new legislations on it. A lot of different people were writing about it at the time. So and that got me thinking about what is decent work. And it's basically the idea that everyone should be employed gainfully, of course, but their employment should come with a certain with with some kind of social security, which is health insurance, or a contract at the very least that gives them the right to a notice period, and so on and so forth, which as you may estimate, many people in India don't have. ILO, I think in 2018, put that number to something to the tune of 90% of all those who are employed in India today are or at least as of 2018, were not in decent work opportunities. They were not employed in decent work opportunities. And that was just a staggering figure for me to wrap my head around. And then later on, again during my undergrad years, I read a book called One Illness Away by Professor Anirudh Krishna. He teaches economics at Duke. And that book just, I mean, it again gave me so much food for thought. Because what that book, I mean, the essential premise, or in one line, the takeaway really is that millions of families in India today are only one illness or an accident away from falling into a poverty trap. And as many of the members of our audience would know, and Dr. Mathur, surely you would know, it's very hard for people to climb out of or really pull themselves out of that kind of poverty trap. And sometimes these could last for generations. And COVID really did show the truth behind this statement. But the second part of the idea that Dr. Krishna emphasizes in his book, or Professor Krishna emphasizes, is that the way out of these poverty traps is, yes, education is part of the answer, but the real answer is actually being employed in a job that at least pays you living wages. That is, you make enough money to at least sustain yourself where you are living. Then people tend to supplement these jobs with some kind of agriculture work of their own, at least in India and some other developing countries that Dr. Krishna writes about in his book. So that is how families have been able to pull themselves out of poverty trap. So then I realized that education, while for me may have been a lot about developing these skills and so on and so forth, it's also, but what is education really doing for people in India today who may not have come from as privileged backgrounds as us on the call today, or others who may be listening to us? So what really is education supposed to be doing for us? And in that sense, so that was a question that I really wanted to answer, which I found some answers to in my first job. I started working as a research associate at SEWA Cooperative Federation. SEWA stands for the Self-Employed Women's Association. It's a labor movement of sorts, where women who work in the informal sector in India have successfully formed their own cooperatives, and then through their cooperatives they have brought themselves access to or have been able to access things like social security and
Prachi, can I just stop you for a minute? SEWA is actually a trade union. It's not a cooperative.
It's no. So the SEWA is actually a movement, and SEWA envisions itself as a banyan tree. So there is, of course, there are many cooperatives that are part of the banyan tree. SEWA Union, as you mentioned, is also a part of, is sort of seen as one of the branches of the banyan tree. The
Yeah.
federation, which I was a part of, is another branch.
Yeah.
And again, so what I was coming to was that so SEWA Cooperative Federation was formed when I think around 110 cooperatives came together, and these are sector agnostic cooperatives. Generally in India, the trend is that milk cooperatives come together to form a federation and so on and so forth, or housing cooperatives for that matter. But SEWA Federation is actually unique in that it's a sector agnostic agglomeration of cooperatives. And the idea that what the federation does is that it provides services that are very hard for cooperatives to individually procure. So for
Yes.
example, research, human resources, administrative tasks, finances, fundraising, so on and so forth. And that's when, being part of this federal structure, especially at the federal level, I realized what does it mean for India to have a quasi-federal structure, or what does it mean for a country to have a quasi-federal structure. That's when a lot of those things started making sense to me as well. I mean, it was just connecting what I was observing in my time at SEWA to the little I know about things happening at the national level and other countries and so on and so forth. And the other takeaway I had during my time at SEWA was that the skill set that we have as researchers is actually really valuable. And research does not need to be limited to writing and publishing papers here and there, and filling up esoteric journals that only 1% of the world population probably reads. But there is some research could be more rhythmic and more invigorating, in that you could use your insights to actually bring about some kind of benefit to, even if it's a very small group of people, but there can be an angle of benefit of that sort, especially with the social, in the world of social science research. And then given my interests in health economics and health, I took up
Prachi, let me just stop you for a minute.
Yeah.
My in-laws used to live in Ahmedabad,
Oh,
and
right.
they knew Ila Bhatt right
Wow.
from the very beginning. And so even when I, met several years ago, Ila Bhatt was in my home for dinner. It wasn't like in a crowd. It was just like 4 or 5 of us. And such an impressive person, unbelievably simple, and yet genius who created all this.
Yeah.
And she was, I mean, by your standards, when she came to my home, she was quite old. She's older than me, younger
Yeah.
than my father and my in-laws. But it was just a great thing to have her just come to my home, and we were just 4 or 5 of us, and have quite a bit of time with her. It was actually great fun and a pleasure to be with her. So I just wanted to add that some of us are old enough to know people who started these things. Okay. And I was also in touch with some of the other senior people in SEWA about a few years ago. It is really one of the world's outstanding organizations because it is directly helping women. It's not got its priorities mixed up in terms of production of this or that, as you rightly said. It's not sector specific, and that is quite an achievement. And just for the young people, I mean, the late 50s, early 60s were an exciting time for educated people, but there were no resources. Absolutely no resources. No one had any money. All you had was your passion. That's all, because there was no money at all. I mean, we were a food short country. We were dependent on ships of wheat arriving to be able to even distribute food. You don't understand today what it was like. You couldn't even offer tea because we were short of sugar. So we were food short, we were sugar short, we were short of everything. And Prime Minister Shastri said, please don't eat grains on Monday because there weren't enough grains. So you can imagine that what she had was no resource, just passion. I just wanted to bring it to the younger people that what you are looking at today is just the work of creative thinking and passion. There was no money. Okay, let's go on.
Yeah, I would also like to take this minute to encourage people to read a book by Ila Ben Bhatt called Anubandh. And some of these ideas that we talk about, some of the things that have become buzzwords now, like sustainability and so on and so forth, are things that Ila Ben had already outlined in Anubandh the decades, I think about 2 decades or so back. And she's, of course, authored many other books. Another such work is we are poor but we are many, which is a statement that
Yes.
really encapsulates
Yes.
really captures the idea that sort of engineered seva and sort of guides a lot of the work that it does to this day. So it's again, I'm very again grateful to have been part of the movement in, although a very small capacity, but I'm obviously very grateful for my time there, the women that I met. I did a lot of field work in rural parts of Gujarat, in Ahmedabad and different parts of Ahmedabad as well. So it was very inspirational and there was a lot to learn in that time. After SEWA, I moved to CEGIS, the Center for Effective Governance of Indian States. This is a action tank founded by Professor Karthik Muralidharan, and the idea is that CEGIS works with state governments to to make marginal improvements in four key areas. Uh, with how it collects and handles data. Um, how does it manage its personnel resources? So HR basically for the government. The third is looking at the interaction between state and markets, and then the fourth is of course the public finance function. So looking at revenues that a state government has, avenues of revenue, and then what does it do with the expenditures, and how can they plan their budgets better, and so on and so forth. So and again, tremendously exciting work at CGIS with that people can read up on and CGIS's website and all its social media handles and so on and so forth. But at CGIS, I was part of the outcome measurement team, or the team that looks at the data that governments collect and what do they do with it. Most specifically for the Department of Women and Child Development in the Bodoland Territorial Council region in Assam. Just for some context, Dr. Mathur, for our audience, that BTC is not really a state, so it is a council, as the name suggests, which is the Bodo people really wanted a state of their own. It's a struggle that has been going on since the 1960s, but
Yes.
for specific, socio-political reasons, it hasn't transpired. That desire has not transpired into they don't have an recognition of being a state, but they are a council, and 44 odd departments powers have been devolved to the council from the government of Assam. And there is of course a lot to unpack in this whole state council relation, and then the council center relation, and the whole triangle that forms, and that of course translates to ground, that its impact on ground realities, on things like malnutrition, are of course
Mhm.
very interesting. And it's a conversation for another time maybe. But what my work there was primarily, I mean, I was working with Anganwadi workers and that Anganwadi system, and looking at how data is collected in that system and what happens with that data, and can that data be used better so that there are fewer cases of malnutrition, or if cases are being identified, there's faster reaction time, and so on and so forth. So those were the outcomes really that we were chasing. And but at CEGIS, although my work was, as I've been talking about, slightly on more on this data side of things, and of course the end outcomes that we were chasing were health related. What I experienced was, Anganwadi workers had started putting up strikes. There were these very irregular but long drawn strikes that workers were performing in, not just in the BTR, the Bodoland area, but all over Assam. Simultaneously, strikes were happening in Maharashtra and a couple of other states. It was obviously in the news. I'm sure many of us have read about it. And the primary reason for these strikes across in the Indian states was that Anganwadi workers were not happy with the pay that they're receiving. For example, in Assam, Anganwadi workers are paid rupees 6,500 a month. I mean, that is just peanuts. You cannot run your own household,
No.
even in rural areas, in that measly amount. Workers in Maharashtra are paid slightly more, but then again, the cost of living in Maharashtra is higher. And what workers there feel is that salary amount is not commensurate with the cost of living there. So then again, this question of decent work was popping up here as well. Not directly in my work that I was doing with CEGIS, but it was there in the background, and something for me which was, personally very hard to ignore. Workers, the Anganwadi workers, Ashas, the frontline cadre, basically on whom the entire public health system in India rests. Unfortunately, they are given the status of a volunteer, so therefore they
Yes.
don't have the job security that comes with a typical government job. They don't have the pension at the end of their service kind of facility that they can look forward to in their retirement, and they give a lot when they are performing the service of an asha or an Anganwadi worker, and so on and so forth. So then again, this question of decent work is just right there front and center, very difficult for me to ignore. And simultaneously across my interactions with people who are around my age, so students who are who are registered in undergraduate colleges, or maybe pursuing their masters, or so on and so forth, folks in that age group in four cities: Calcutta, Pune, Ahmedabad, Kokrajhar, at four different points in time in my life. Couple of common threads started coming out, which is first that there's this very strong rat race in India's youth today to chase government jobs. Just today, this morning, I was reading an article in the Economic Times which stated that for about, there were the UPSC examinations basically see a part, lakhs of people applying. There have been around up to, I think there was some number that was very close to 1 million of people who have sat for some part of the UPSC exam, or at least the first level of the UPSC exam, and a variety of other federal level job related examinations in the last decade or so, or a period slightly less than a decade. And it was such a staggering number, and I see that everywhere, with be it with the youth in Kokrajhar or other parts of Assam, or be it with youth in Ahmedabad or Calcutta. Everyone wants to write the UPSC or some government job exam, because not because they feel, I mean, yes, there is a good number of people who do it from the perspective of, service. They really want to be part of the public service system, and they really do want to work as a civil servant and use their agency to bring about the change that they can see, that they want to see. But there is a larger chunk of population for whom the primary motivation is the job security that comes with being in a government job, with the steady paycheck that comes with being in a government job, or the social security also that comes with being in a government job. And consequently, there are many who, of course, don't land these jobs because these jobs are very scarce, and there's, just such a large amount of competition for it. So people have wasted years of their lives. For me, it sounded slightly irrational, but when I spoke to a certain, certain people, and I saw it from their perspective, it did make sense. Like, oh, what if I crack that exam this year? I'm set for life. And just that, oh, it's just this one exam, and they've probably spent 7 years of their 20s just trying to crack some government job exam or the other, and consequently they lose out on a lot of other opportunities that may be awaiting them in the private sector. uh, and that, I mean, that train of thought, when I pursued that train of thought, that why is it that they're not looking at the private sector, is when I realized that folks, when they're in their undergraduate years, the next thing they look forward to just blindly almost is a master's degree. And in India, at least, it's almost a given that, oh, I did a BCom honors degree in my undergrad, so my next step is either an MBA, or it is a MCom in many cases. In metropolitan cities, people also try for things like becoming a CA, or taking the CFA if they come from a certain privileged background, actually, so on and so forth. But it's a very clear cut path that they know, and they try to go down that road. But what I see is the reason why there's no one stopping and questioning, oh, do I really want to go down this road or not? So now, and through these interactions with students and all these different colleges, there are three basic things that I find lacking. First is the skills to access job opportunities. So Dr. Mathur and I are speaking today because we connected on LinkedIn. My job at CEGIS happened because some HR representative at CEGIS found my profile on LinkedIn, reached out to me, and then one conversation led to another, and so on and so forth. And I had a job at the end of it. So, but there are many out there who don't even know that LinkedIn as a platform exists, and that it could be used to find job opportunities, or to, just meet new people, and then think, serendipity can then, take its role. So first, that people lack the skills and maybe some basic knowledge to access opportunities. They also lack the knowledge to identify these very opportunities, as I tried to establish through this LinkedIn point. And the third is that they often lack the skills to perform in these jobs. So their undergraduate education, or even in some cases the master's degree that they have done, does not train them or prepare them for a life of work. Many people in Kokrajhar, that many students in Kokrajhar that I met, were unfamiliar with the MS Office suite or the G suite, which is a basic requirement no matter which sector of work you're looking at today. And their basic functionality on what does it mean to read a graph, and so on and so forth. So some fundamental skills are missing. Some fundamental skills in terms of job seeking, about what does it mean to make a CV or make a portfolio or a resume, is lacking. And this is as much, I mean, the frequency might be smaller, but it is still there in places in, large metropolitan cities like Calcutta and Ahmedabad, in my experience. So for me, reflecting on all of this, I obviously acknowledge the privilege that I had to, just imbibe these things from a function of being at a school like Modern Eye, or at a college like Flame, where I already had seniors who were doing similar things. So I saw them, and it was sort of like almost like osmosis, about, oh, you have to have a LinkedIn account, or oh, you have to have a CV. But then I acknowledge that the privilege that I have, but this is a problem, and it's something that I hope to work towards in the future. I'm not sure of how or where, and that's where I look forward to ideas that might come in. And yeah, this is where I'd like to
Hey,
take a
Prachi,
pause.
you have given a very passionate account of what you learned and what you did. I think some of the decisions you made maybe helpful to explain them to younger people, how you decided to go to Flame, why you chose that, why you chose to start work, not to do a master's degree. You said people do it blindly. So what was your insight in these two decisions?
So first to go to Flame, when I was applying for colleges when at 18, I was very clear. I had commerce in my 11th and 12th grade and commerce with maths, and I absolutely hated accounts and commerce. Not for the lack of try on my teacher's part, but just simply because I just found those subjects to be extremely dry, and I took it blindly. Actually, I took those subjects very blindly. I have an elder sibling and she had commerce, and that was my very early lesson into, just not to blindly follow into other people's footsteps. Just because something worked out for someone does
Mm,
not mean that it'll work out for you. One size does not fit all is the lesson I learned from choosing commerce in 11th and 12th, just because my elder sibling took it and she performed well and so on and so forth. So I was looking at what can I do with with my 11th 12th in commerce. Of course, I don't know what can I do. And then that's when I heard that a couple of my seniors from school had gone to Flame. It's a liberal arts college, and at that time there were one or two or liberal arts colleges in India, and now this concept has of course mushroomed, and I'm happy to see it mushroom. But back then there were only one or two places, Flame being one of the first colleges to start this idea of liberal education in India. And the concept of a liberal arts college really stood out for me. The chance to really spend a year or so exploring and doing different courses was just very exciting and very hard for me to say no to. I of course did not want to just typically go into a BCom program, because clearly commerce was not for me, and law was something else that I was considering. But then I chose not to pursue that because it was not I didn't want to do law because something about law interested me, but but I wanted to do law because of the lack of other options. So in that case, the idea of being in a liberal arts college and having the chance to spend a year studying things at a more advanced level, but a variety of things, and then making a choice of what is it that I want to do, was something that again sounded exciting, and it paid off because I accidentally sat in a public policy class. I thought it was some political science class, but I mixed up the course codes and I was in a public policy class. And then I went to the first lecture thinking, okay, I mean, now that I've signed up for it, let me go, let me see what this is about. And it's safe to say that my mind was just blown that day, because all these things that I
mm,
wanted to think about, and
mm.
all these things that I wanted to, do, it seemed to fall under this ambit of public policy. And then one class led to another, and I had done an entire term in it. And by the end of the term, I wanted to major in public policy. And that's how I came to economics, because, the link is very much there.
Right.
But so that was about Flame. And
Okay, hang on
about,
for a second. Let's
uh,
since as you said, Flame was the first, and there are
hmm.
just a couple of such places. Maybe you could tell the viewers what's the difference between them and say DU or Presidency or University of Calcutta, the conventional powerhouses. What's the difference?
I think the first difference that actually flows from what I was mentioning is that when I cannot comment on DU, sir, because I have not studied in
No,
DU,
but
and
it's, like
yeah,
you go to DU,
it's commonly
you
aware,
take,
yeah.
what
So,
it is. You take
huh,
econ
so
honors or you take political
exactly.
science
So
honors.
it
You
you
know it from
start,
day one, right? You are admitted
yes.
into. So what's the
Exactly. So that is what I was coming to, that the primary difference is, of course, from day one, you're already enrolled in a program. You know that your degree will be, as say you've signed up for economic honors, then you know that you have BSc honors is what you will have at the end of your 3 years or whatever amount of time you spend at university. In a place like Flame, that is open ended. So when you go in, you have a chance to really take. In one term, I was doing a course in calculus, but I was also doing a course in theater. So I could really see how I feel about different things. There was room for reflection. The other thing is, I would say in typical conventional programs like in say Presidency or even DU for that matter, maybe, is that you have a course your courses are pre-selected for you, so you know that term 1 you have ABC courses, term 2 so on and so forth. But in a place like Flame, it's really just up to you. Yes, once you have declared your major and minor, then there are certain courses that you absolutely have to do to get a degree in, say, economics. So I cannot get a degree in economics without doing microeconomics and macroeconomics, obviously, so, or even econometrics for that matter. But outside of that, I have a lot more flexibility. The third thing is that in a place like Flame, and I'm not sure if this, to what extent this happens in other colleges, but you have the flexibility to sign up for classes with other departments. So in I did courses with the international relations department. I audited classes with the environmental sciences department, simply out of pure interest. Something, if another department organized a workshop, it was not closed off to me because I was not a student in that department. So that was another thing. This is largely at a systemic level that I would comment on. But what made Flame is very unique for me, and I doubt this would have happened had I been in any other college, is the kind of relationship that I share with my professors even to this day. My So in my first year I had a class called Intro to Political Theory, which was a class of just 3 people. So you can imagine the fun that we had. I mean, one of the other girls in the class and I, we generally did our readings and we came, and the professor was of course also really passionate about teaching it, so she did not mind taking a class of just 3 students. And then we, although there was a classroom allotted to us, we didn't really do our classes in that classroom. We sat under a tree on campus somewhere. Someday we are sitting at the cafeteria because the class timings coincided with the snack time in the cafeteria, in the mess. So we did our class in the mess, and the classes were a real treat. It was something that I really look forward to. That one class is something, I mean, it's one example, but things like that are possible in a space like Flame, and I don't know to what extent they're possible outside. So
They're
I
not possible outside. Yes, this I can assure you that
yeah
it's
so
not possible. Okay.
so this yeah so I think these are things that that really make
But
Flame
isn't
and
Flame a
colleges
bit
like
isolated? It's so far outside Pune.
No, I mean, it's just 30-40 minutes outside Pune. Flame runs a bus shuttle service. So there are buses that run from campus to FC Road, which is sort of like a central point in Pune. And uh, so it does take 30-40 minutes and maybe sometimes longer. And I think now they've built some flyover or a bridge that side. So I believe that the time has been cut short. I really need to revisit my alma mater to confirm that. But it's not that isolated. It, at least to me, it did not feel that isolating because of this connectivity that was there.
Okay. All right. Now continue, please. I interrupted you to talk about Flame because I know that people don't know what it is and they should
Yeah.
hear from somebody who studied there.
Yeah, I mean, for me personally, it's been a real treat. And if someone in the audience today wants to know more, or in terms of how to apply, because their application process is also very different from the application process that typical other colleges have. It's not just dependent on your ISC or your board exam scores. They look at a lot of other things. So if I'm happy to get in touch with people and help them out
All right.
in whatever way I can. Uh, you also asked very interestingly about why is it that I worked right after undergrad and
Yes,
not
that is the second question.
so, so now the thing is at Flame, most of the seniors that I was very good friends with, very few of them actually did a master's degree straight out of undergrad. I
Yeah.
think because of the kind of that whole idea of exploring and then deciding sort of a trait was probably instilled in us as students at Flame. So many seniors or many friends of mine, they ended up doing the 4th year at Flame, which was at that time optional. Now I think it's no longer optional because of the NEP, but people did a 4th year, or they did some internship straight out of college or a job and all of that, and then they probably worked for 1 or 2 years, and then they went for a master's degree. And I thought that that was again a very good way of looking at it, because personally, when I graduated from Flame, I was convinced that I should either do a master's in public health or a master's in public policy. And now I will be starting a master's in economics in August, later in towards the fag end of August. So
And where
working
will that be?
at SciencesPo in Paris,
Wow.
and so it's
That's not a minor achievement.
yes. Uh, so I liked the idea of, working and sort of being in this hypothesis testing phase. I really thought to myself that, I think I want to work in public health. I think I have an interest in solving all these labor problems, or at least engaging with these problems.
Mm.
And all of this thinking actually comes from maybe, some books that I read, like the Dr. Krishnan Walla, the book that I cited, or maybe some of the internships that I did. But maybe when I actually start working in that space, I'll realize that this is something that I probably don't want to do. I really want to avoid that situation where I'm having, a quarter life crisis. I think that what the hell did I get myself into? I do not want that outcome in life. That outcome scares me. So I thought it would be best to work in different situations, um, and then make a more informed choice on what is it that I should, really go deeper into. Because I think at 2021, when I was graduating, I thought to get a master's degree means that you're actually mastering, or you're going really deep into something, right? So I wanted to be very conscious of what that would be. The other thing is, I come from Bengal, and I had the opportunity, the pleasure of being in Assam, and there's a word in that both that's shared in Assamese and Bangla. It's called Jajabor. The word basically translates to someone who's a wanderer. Bhupen Hazarika, who's a great
Yes.
Assam songwriter, he actually
Yes.
has a song called Moi Eti Jajabor, which means I am a Jajabor. And
Yeah.
again, I urge our audience to actually listen to that song and maybe look at
Yeah.
the translation of the lyrics. But Jajabor is basically someone who wanders around rootless. I
Mm.
am not rootless. I very much have a family in Calcutta that I want to keep coming back to. But that idea did, but that concept, just it hit me that I have my 20s ahead of me, and I really want to use my 20s to be a Jajabor of sorts, where
Mm.
I am in very different situations, and but I keep coming back home, unlike a proper Jajabor, I must add. So
Okay.
I wanted to do that, and I've been, as a child, I've been innately curious about people and communities, and I have had never been scared of going up to strangers and saying hi. So I thought being able to work would give me the freedom to be in very different situations,
Mm.
and fortunately that has been the case. So
Okay. Any
yeah.
tips you have for younger people? You.
Yeah, there's a person called Simon Sinek, who wrote a book called Start with Why, which I encourage everyone to read. And the premise of that book is that once you know why you want to do certain things, then the how and what will automatically fall into place. And he cites a lot of examples of, how companies have been very successful, especially Apple. He writes a lot about Apple in that book, and he talks about how so much of what the good in the world comes from people who had a very clear why. So that was one idea that sort of got me working and everything.
Mm.
But then this whole, this Jajabor story that I said, from that, reflecting on that, I realized that while knowing your why is important, it's also important to ask yourself why not. So when I took up that job in Kokrajhar is a tier 4 city in Assam. And when I said yes to the job, people in my family were not very excited, to say the least, because when my parents googled Kokrajhar, and the first images that popped up in their Google search was, people with, guns in their hand and all of
Yeah.
that, so it kind of painted a very scary picture. But then I said why not, because I learned about, when in the interview process, etc., when I read up on the history of Bodoland, or rather the brief history that I found about Bodoland, I realized that I had been very ignorant. So, because this is a place which is just 18 hours away by train from Calcutta, and I had no idea that it had, such a strong struggle, and this is where the Bodo people are at, and all of that. So, I found myself asking, why not go there and see what happened and actually meet people who have lived experiences of this. So, I think people in my generation are very focused. I find themselves asking the question why. So if you know that you ask yourself why a lot, then try asking yourself why not. And if you're in that why not category, then ask yourself why as well, is I think what I would probably uh, leave youngsters with.
So global optimization. Look
Yeah.
at not local optimization, but
Yes.
global optimization.
Yes.
Look
That's
at
actually
look at this and look at that, and then choose. That's global optimization, right? Okay. All right. Anything else you want to tell us?
No, I mean, yeah, if you ever find me on a train or a flight, come say hi. I love
Okay.
talking to people. So,
All right. Well, thank you so much, Prachi. It has been a real pleasure listening to you. And I know you will do well in France.
thank
Keep going. All right. So let's end it here today, shall we?
thank you, Dr. Mathur. It's been a pleasure as well.
Okay, good. I'll be back with another young person or an expert soon. Bye till then. Bye, everybody.